Hello, everyone. I'm Billy.
And I'm Kamraun. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors and the creators of the Malazan Brotherhood.
Today we will be discussing. We might as well just leave this in there for everyone. I have a great appreciation for the fact that you read this whole script, dude. Make it look easy because I jump in here and make a bunch of remarks, off the cuff, and it's like. And you have to read all this stuff. It's like, it's brutal, dude. So respect, brother. Today we will be discussing. Okay. Hold on, rented lips. We're going to try this one more time. Radiation. I'm sorry. There's an old Steve Martin radiation. It's not radiation. It's radiation. It's a joke.
Okay.
Today, we will be discussing Book 7, Chapter 20 of Gardens of the Moon, a novel set in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 1 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's most definitely not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Both Billy and I believe this to be the best fantasy story ever written and want to share our love of the series with you.
We will be covering the events in this book in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those of you who have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book. But knowing me in my big mouth, I'm sure to spoil something for someone. So in advance, I'm sorry. Not like Flint, Michigan, a city responsible for contaminating the drinking water over 8 years ago and are still trying to get around to fixing it, kind of. I'm sorry. But I mean, I'm sorry when I say I'm sorry.
I can't believe they still haven't fixed that yet.
This is getting harder and harder. I'm having a hard time with you.
Really?
Yeah, no, I say that. I mean, I can look for to find a way to word this is kind of funny. I have a lot of respect for comic writers now. Comedic writing.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It's a skill. Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
A quick warning, today's episode contains no violence, but will likely contain a large amount of goofing around and laughter. Listener discretion is advised.
Is that what we've come to, afraid to make people laugh? The humanity.
Well, if they're at work and something really gets them, someone might be like, what's so funny? What are you listening to? Why aren't you working?
Oh, that's true. So, yeah. Okay, well.
There have been a couple podcasts I've listened to where I really just lost it. It's one comment or another.
That's the joy of working my job. I sit in an office by myself, so I can laugh at whatever I want to. So, and our show is listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we would really appreciate that. And you can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com.
Also, we would really like to hear from you. Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
There is a little bit of a correction on my part, but I'm loath to say this. Well, maybe I should be because I don't want people coming here. I live in my small town. I have made a comment about my small town's humidity level being lower than I've reported, lower than it actually was. I think I said it was staggeringly low, like 20-something to 30-something percent. It's probably more like 65% is the actual humidity, but it's hill country. It's not like living in the big city. It's a lot cooler physically and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, because it stemmed from a conversation about Sweaty Town, Darujistan, right next to the lake, and I was talking about how humid Houston is because it's average 75% humidity, year round, and it can go up or down depending. But I prefer a desert climate. And Billy was working on recruiting me out
there. Dude, I'm still trying to get him to come out here, dude. It's amazing here, brother. Hey, Lukenbach, Lukenbach is right in the vicinity. It's a shouting distance from here. It's about 20 miles.
Okay.
You can go hang out in Lukenbach, Texas, where Waylon and Willie and the boys used to hang out. And they really hung out in Fredericksburg and in Lukenbach, I'm assuming, having a great time partying in those vicinities. It's a beautiful place.
That's Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson,
yes.
I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's that kind of country. It's beautiful. It's cool that way as well. It's cool on many levels.
All right.
Cool cubed.
Is there a fourth dimension of being cool?
Well, you are if you listen.
Would that be the coolest?
If you are listening to this show, then that is the coolest.
Okay.
It's a bold statement, I know.
It transcends time and space.
Yes.
All right. Book 7, The Fate, Chapter 20. Book 7 begins with a poem that does a great job of setting the stage for the day ahead. Quote, "The flaying of Fander, she-wolf of winter, marks the dawn of Getaron. The priestesses race down the streets, strips of wolf fur streaming from their hands. Banners are unfurled. The noises and smells of the market rise into the morning air. Masks are donned. The citizens discard the year's worries and dance across the day into night. The Lady of Spring is born anew. It is as if the gods themselves pause their breath. End quote. Chapter 20 begins with another poem written by Hebrick. This is a name you should commit to memory.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "It is said that the matron's blood, like ice, brought forth into this world a birthing of dragons, and this flowing river of fate brought light into dark and dark into light, unveiling at last in cold, cold eyes the children of chaos." End quote. The title of this poem is Tamatha's Children. Tamatha is another name for Tiam, who is the elder goddess of the Elaint, or dragons. Note how her children are referred to as the children of chaos, since dragons are the closest beings to chaos.
I guess so. Wow, that's kind of scary. Those are some, yeah. These dragons, man. I don't know. There's dragons in this series, and we don't get enough of them. And I think, and I'm thankful for that, because there are some serious forces of nature in this.
Yes, they're very elemental.
Yes,
in a way.
Primordial.
Always cause trouble. They're so powerful.
Yeah.
And a lot of elder individuals.
Yes.
Right. They're all generally elder.
Yeah.
We shouldn't get too far into it.
No, that's enough.
Yeah.
Enough. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Strike it from the record. Motion to strike.
Seconded.
Murillo walked the streets of Darujistan alone. He thought about Ralik's healed wound and had already concluded that the powder Baruch had given Ralik had caused the rapid healing to occur. Regardless, Ralik had lost a lot of blood and needed time to recover. They didn't have the time for that now, and Murillo wondered if Ralik was capable of killing Or given his current state. I like the way this quote was written. Quote, "He strode down the empty street, cleaving the low-lying mists that swirled like incandescent cloaks in the gaslight." End quote. I just thought that was really well worded.
It is. Man,
like that
Erikson
sentence.
Is just, God gracious. Everything's well written with this guy.
Yeah.
I don't find many sentences lost with this dude. You know?
I was tempted to write the whole paragraph. I was like, I just stop. You just you get to write the whole chapter, just verbatim.
Yeah, exactly.
Dawn was still 2 hours away, and the custom was for the New Year's celebrations to begin at sunrise. Now, given the task before them, neither Ralik nor Murillo are getting any sleep on the night before the fete. They'll be exhausted when they need their wits the most.
Oh, I know. And for a mission like this, being well rested and fed is a pretty crucial part of prep, isn't it?
Yes. Just given the nature of what they're going to be doing, there's going to be some physicality to it, but also their wits are critical, and you got to be sharp. You can't have brain fog staying up 48 hours straight. And it's not just those two as well. Baruch's been staying up all night. We'll see him later in the chapter. Mamet, Rake, all these people, they're staying up, and it just seems like they're not sleeping at all.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can understand like these high mages. Maybe they kind of draw some kind of nourishment, from being with these convergences. Maybe there's something
from the source.
Yeah. There you go. Nice.
Yeah. The year of the 5 tusks was ending, and in its place, the year of the moon's tears arrived. Murillo pondered on the arcane titles and how, as a child, he'd thought the massive stone disc in Majesty Hall, marked with the cycle of the age, had been magic. Mamet had explained to him that the wheel was a machine, gifted to Darujistan over 1,000 years ago by a man named Ikariam. That's the introduction of another important character. Remember this name as well.
Yes, love that dude.
Mm-hmm. Mamet believed Ikariam had Jaghut blood. The accounts claimed he had ridden a Jaghut horse, and a Trell stood at his side. The Jaghut were known to have been skilled at such creations, and this is in reference to the mechanical clock disc thing that was keeping the calendar for Darujistan. An additional point here, we don't get a description on what a Trell is yet. More to come on that in Deadhouse Gates. Patience.
Yes.
Murillo thought of the names of the years and their significance. Seers maintained that the closeness of the 5 tusks with moon's tears held prophecy. The boar god Tenorok's tusks were named Hate, Love, Laughter, War, and Tears. The New Year's name indicated tears would be dominant in the coming year. Murillo was skeptical of astrology. How could a man, or Jaghut, 1,000 years ago have predicted anything so far in the future? The arrival of Moonspawn had thrown the new year into a different light for him. As Murillo turned a corner to approach the Phoenix Inn, he collided with a short, fat man in a red coat. The man dropped the 3 boxes he had been carrying. They spilled their contents onto the ground. Kruppa said, "Aye! Why, Murillo? Such fortune as Kruppa is known for. Thus does your search end, here, in this dank, dark street, where even the rats shun the shadow. What? Is something the matter, friend Murillo?" Murillo stared down at the objects strewn in the street and asked, "What are these for, Kruppa?" Kruppa frowned down at the expertly carved masks and said, "Gifts, friend Murillo, of course. For you and Ralik Nom. After all, the lady Simtal's fate demands the finest in workmanship, the subtlest of design, perfectly mated with ironic intent. Don't you think Kruppa's taste is sufficiently expensive? Do you fear embarrassment?" I guess this is what Kruppa meant when he said he'd be offering them assistance and such.
Do you think there's more to it than that, though?
It probably will be, but this is the beginnings of what we're seeing.
Nice. And what's funny, Kruppa made a statement up here that's kind of funny when he first runs into it, like he's startled by Murillo, but it's the way he says it, it's almost like he knows Murillo's already looking for him.
Yes. He says, "You found me."
Like,
yeah,
you found
basically.
me. It's like, what? What?
Murillo growled, "You'll not distract me this time. First of all, there are 3 masks here, not 2. Kruppa said, "Indeed." He bent down and picked one up, and he brushed off the mud from the surface. He continued, "This is Kruppa's own. Well chosen," Kruppa pronounces with certain aplomb. Murillo gave him a hard look and told him he wasn't going to the fete. Kruppa fired back, "Well, of course Kruppa will attend. Do you think Lady Simtal would ever show herself if her longtime acquaintance, Kruppa the First, was not in attendance? Why, she'd wither with shame." I wonder why he chose Kruppa the First. I would have thought something more along the lines of Kruppa the Only.
I don't know. It's Kruppa the First sounds kind of more magnificent in a way, but it sounds like he kind of wants to expand his franchise. Maybe, I don't know.
I figured it'd be more Kruppa the First, the Last, the Only.
Oh yeah,
or something, some long-winded, ridiculous thing.
We need Tool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine him as a court greeter?
Oh, that'd be great.
Real dry. Real dry.
Murillo yelled, "Damn it, you've never even met Simtal." Kruppa said, "Not relevant to Kruppa's argument, friend Murillo. Kruppa has been acquainted with Simtal's existence for many years. Such association is made better, nay, pristine, for the fact that she has not met Kruppa, nor Kruppa her. And, in final argument designed to end all discussion, here." Kruppa pulled out a parchment tied with a blue silk ribbon from his sleeve. He said, "Kruppa's invitation, signed by the lady herself." Murillo attempted to snatch the invitation, but Kruppa deftly put it back in his sleeve. Murillo said, "Ralik will kill you." Kruppa put his mask on and said, "Nonsense. How will the lad ever recognize Kruppa?" Murillo observed Kruppa's round body, his faded red waistcoat, the gathered cuffs of his jacket, and his short, oily curls on his head, then sighed and said, "Never mind." Kruppa said, "Excellent. Now please accept these 2 masks, gifts from your friend Kruppa." He went on to say this saved him a trip, and now he could deliver a message that must not be mentioned to Baruch. As Kruppa spun to leave, Murillo grabbed his arm and said, "Wait a minute. Have you seen Call?" Kruppa said, "Why, of course. The man sleeps a deep, recovering sleep from his ordeals. 'Twas healed magically," Salty said, "by some stranger yet. Call himself was brought in by yet a second stranger, who found a third stranger, who in turn brought a 5th stranger in the company of the stranger who healed Call. And so it goes, friend Murillo. Strange doings indeed. Now Kruppa must be off. Goodbye, friend." Can you think of a more confusing way to explain that situation to anyone?
I most certainly cannot think of one that's very convoluted.
He jumped from a 3rd stranger to a 5th stranger. I never saw a 4th in there. You
Yeah.
kind of lost me.
I see how the hands does it, but is this part of the setup for what he's doing?
Good question. Kruppa makes to leave, and Murillo snarled, "Not yet," and glanced around and confirmed the street was still empty. He leaned closer to Kruppa and said, "I've worked some things out, Kruppa. Circle Breaker contacting me put everything into order in my mind. I know who you are." Kruppa cried, "I'll not deny it then. It's true, Murillo. Kruppa is Lady Simtal, connivingly disguised." That'd be quite the good disguise.
That would be amazing.
Murillo said, "Not this time. No distractions. You're the eel, Kruppa. All this blubbering, sweaty, meek mouse stuff is just an act, isn't it? You've got half this city in your pocket, eel." Kruppa took out his handkerchief and mopped his brow, then wrung it out. A torrent of sweat drenched the cobblestones. Murillo laughed and said, "No more magical cantrips, Kruppa. I've known you a long time, remember? I've seen you cast spells. You've got everybody fooled, but not me. I'm not telling, though. You don't have to worry about that. Then again, if you don't come out with it here and now, I might get annoyed." Kruppa sighed and returned his handkerchief to his sleeve. He said, "Annoyance is uncalled for," then waved a hand and fluttered his fingers. I wish we were on video to make our best attempts at recreating this.
Oh,
This
yeah, that
little
would be
hand
pretty
wave
funny.
with the fluttering fingers.
Yes. Oh, that's too funny.
Murillo blinked and was suddenly dizzy. He rubbed his forehead and frowned, having forgotten what they had been discussing. He thought it couldn't have been important and said, "Thanks for the masks, friend. They'll come in handy, I'm sure." Murillo's frown deepened, and he thought that was a confusing thing to say. It was also odd that he wasn't angry that Kruppa had figured their plan out, or even that he would attend the fete. He mumbled, "Good that call's all right, isn't it? Well, I'd better head back to check on Rallick." Kruppa smiled and nodded. "Until the fete, then, fare you well, Murillo, Kruppa's finest and dearest friend." Murillo bid Kruppa good night and turned to go back to his quarters. He attributed his confusion to lack of sleep. Let's talk about Kruppa's little cantrip here. Would you take this as Makra?
Yes. Especially after the way it kind of left him with a little head, like rubbing his head and a little confused, kind of like that. Huh. Yeah, I feel very much like that.
Okay. And for those that may not have listened earlier to our coverage of this book, Makra was one of the warns that we covered right before the Battle of Pale. The Mage Khaled was using Makra, and we described it as it's kind of like Jedi mind tricks in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's something else to it, apparently. They weaponize it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
We know of a certain group in particular that does.
It's mostly just mental games, right?
It is, but the way Erikson I know sees illusion in particular is that it can be weaponized. That's the great thing about illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Is it can be highly weaponizable. Apparently, I had not thought about it like that.
Right. Now, what we saw right here is about as close as we're going to get to "these aren't the droids you're looking for" as we're going to get in these books, right? With the hand wave and everything.
Amazing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Except you get to throw it on top of that. That's a cartoon scene. I can imagine him wringing out
Oh, man.
his handkerchief and great big fat drops of sweat hitting the ground. It's
Mhm.
like from a Bugs Bunny or something like that. I can just almost see it. It's too funny.
Right. Now, question for you. How many times do you think he's had to mind wipe members of his friend group to protect his identity?
Men in Black, anyone?
Oh, yeah.
That's a scary thought. I would like to hope he doesn't do that to his friends unless it rises to this level of a threat to his identity.
Mm-hmm.
Because I honestly think Kruppa loves his friend.
Oh, yeah.
And would most likely not mess with their heads any more than his usual talking goes to their heads.
Beyond just the general trauma of being Kruppa's friend.
Exactly. It's not quite as bad as being Delirium's friend. Did you ever watch Sandman on Netflix?
No, never got around to
Sandman's a really brilliant. It's based on a comic series. People are not people, but it's like dream, death, desire, delirium, which used to be delight, but has turned to delirium. So when you hang out with delirium, you don't want to be caught around her presence as a human.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so. If Kruppa's like that, at least he's not delirious. He's just confusing.
Right. All right. We go to Animander Rake, who is lounged in a chair across from Baruch. Baruch said, "I don't think it's a very good idea, Rake." Rake raised an eyebrow and said, As I understand such things, the event includes the wearing of disguises. Do you fear I lack taste? Baruch snapped. I've no doubt your attire will be suitable, particularly if you choose the costume of a Tistandi warlord. It's the council that worries me. They're not all fools. Baruch sure gets snippy with Rake, doesn't he? He's lucky
Yes, he
Rake is slow to
does.
anger.
Unlike a certain older fella here, Calor, dude, that Rake is a paragon of many, many virtues. I'm on this read through. I see him, and I've always seen him as a one I've always admired through the
Mm-hmm.
series. But when you look at him like this, you realize kind of who he is and what he does. You're like, man, he is a pretty chill out dude. He's got a lot of great virtues going for him.
Right. Between selflessly defending Darujistan and
Yeah.
asking nothing in return, and then just the measure of patience that we've seen from him, and then him trying to give his people something to live for, and his sense of duty. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask. This is something that just came to mind when he said something to Baruch, and a few, however many chapters ago it was, how he just likes to frustrate the Empress.
Mm-hmm.
Is part of it just an ornery streak in him that I like? Sometimes I get that in me. Sometimes where it's like I'm normally really cool about things. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm really cool until you hit that mark with me, and then I'm just for ornery's sake. I'm just going to be that way.
Obstinate.
Yes. Is that how it is? I don't take him that way. I don't take him as he's not petty,
Yeah, I don't think so.
but I do see him taking joy in the moments. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he just takes the joy where he finds it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another good virtue.
Agreed. Rake said, I would be surprised if they were. This in reference to the councilmen not all being fools. He said, indeed, I would have you point out the cunning ones. I don't imagine you will refute my suspicion that there are those within the council seeking to pave the way for the Empress, for a price, of course. Power comes to mind. Nobles delving in merchant trades no doubt drool at the prospect of empire trade. Am I far off the mark, Baruch? Baruch sourly admitted he wasn't, but they had it under control. Rake mentioned there was another reason he wanted to attend the fete, to meet the other members of the Torud Cabal. He asked if any would attend. Baruch said they would be in attendance, but the debacle between Rake and the Assassins Guild made a large number of them rue their alliance with Rake. They wouldn't appreciate Rake's presence. Rake smiled and said, to the extent that they will reveal their community to cunning council members, I think not. Rake rose and continued, no, I would like to attend this fete. My own people hold little to such social affairs. There are times when I grow weary of their dour preoccupations. Baruch looked at Rake and said, you suspect a convergence, don't you? A fell gathering of powers like iron filings to a lodestone. Rake admitted, with so much power gathered in one place, it's likely. I'd rather be on hand in such circumstances. Also, if this event is as publicly known as you suggest, then the Empire's agents within the city will know of it. Should they wish to cut out Darujistan's heart, they'll have no better opportunity. Baruch barely held back a shiver. He said, extra guards have been hired, of course. If an Empire claw should strike, they will find their hands full with the Torud mages besides. He thought for a moment, then nodded. He said, very well, Rake. Simtal will accept you as my guest. You will wear an effective disguise? Rake said, naturally. Baruch stood up and walked to the window to observe the dawn. He whispered, and so it begins. Rake walked to his side and asked, what begins? Baruch said, the new year. Past is the 5 tusks. The dawn you see marks the birth of the year of the moon's tears. Rake stiffened. It's interesting that they start the new year with the dawn and not midnight like we do. Thematically, it makes more sense to me this way.
Yes, it does. And I just now have a curious question that I hadn't thought about is, do they wait for the dawn? It's like, I'm curious about this edifice, this clock, this device. Is it like a central clock tower or something?
It was at Majesty Hall.
Majesty. So I'm assuming it has a pretty preeminent location. I'm assuming that's the not. So does it? Is dawn when the sun hits that thing? Is that when they because it's in particular that thing because Ikarium has laid all this stuff out, the year of the Tusk and all this other stuff in advance. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm sure it lines up with the dawn.
Yeah, that's kind of that's what I'm guessing.
Baruch noticed Rake's reaction and said, "Indeed, an unusual coincidence, though I would put little weight upon it. The titles were devised over a millennium ago by a visitor to these lands. When Rake spoke, it was in a whisper. Icarium's gifts, I recognized the style. 5 tusks, moon's tears. The wheel is his, correct?" Baruch's eyes were wide, and he hissed between his teeth in surprise. He had at least a dozen questions, but Rake went on. "In the future, I'd suggest you heed Icarium's gifts. All of them. 1,000 years is not so long a time, alchemist. Not so long a time. Icarium last visited me 800 years ago in the company of Trell Mappo and Osric, or Osirk, as the local worshippers call him." Rake smiled bitterly and said, "Osric and I argued, as I recall, and it was all Brood could do to keep us apart. It was an old argument." Trell Mappo, is that reverse?
It's Mappo Runt.
Okay, so we'll just leave it. That's probably a Garden of the Moonism, right?
Yeah, it's got to be, because I looked it up that way, and it breaks apart the Trell and it breaks apart other things, but in regards to him, he's got his own thing as Mappo Runt.
This last paragraph, there's a number of names in here that are important.
Yeah,
Mappo in particular, and then Osric or Osirk. Both of those are important names that are going to come back up again.
Yeah, Mappo is not quite what we would call an elder, but he is ancient.
Yeah,
I don't know what the difference between an elder and an ancient. I'm assuming it's a difference of 150,000 years or so.
It's a question of millennia.
Yes. He's younger than 300,000 years old, but he's older than 1,000 years easily. So,
right. Rake fell silent, lost in his memories. Roald knocked at the door and entered, then bowed. He said, "Master Baruch, Mamet has awakened and appears refreshed. More, your agent Kruppa has delivered a verbal message. He extends his regret that he cannot deliver it to you in person. Do you wish to receive it now?" Baruch confirmed. Roald bowed again and said, "The eel will contact you the eve of this day at Lady Simtal's fate. The eel further finds the prospect of shared information and cooperation intriguing. That is all." Baruch brightened and said, "Excellent." Roald asked if he should bring Mamet to Baruch, and Baruch said he should if Mamet was able. Roald said Mamet was able and left to retrieve him. Baruch laughed and said, "As I said, everyone will be there, and in this case, everyone is an appropriate term." Rake gave him a blank look, and Baruch's smile grew. He said, "The eel, Lord, Darujasan's master spy, a figure without a face." Rake said, "A masked face." Baruch said, "If my suspicions are correct, the mask won't help the eel one bit." He knows, just like Murillo, I guess. He must suspect it's Kruppa.
Yeah, I'm going to do it, dude. Sorry. South Park reference incoming. I'm so sorry.
Oh, my gosh.
In Super Best Friends episode, the band episode, you don't want to talk about the Blaney Axe?
Yes.
Okay. So all the kids shave their heads. And when they show them, you are seeing everybody. And that includes Kenny and Butters, all of them. And you can tell no difference.
Mm-hmm.
Except for Eric. And Eric, Eric walks up and goes, "Hey guys, guess who I am?" "Hey, hello, Cartman, what's up?" And they're like, "How'd you guys know?" It's like,
Okay, I got to give it to you. That's an excellent reference. That's great. Perfectly fitting for this.
I thought so. I thought that was an acceptable moment for that, because that's
well done, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mamet entered the room, looking healthy and full of energy. He nodded to Baruch and said, "Withdrawal proved easier than I'd imagined." He turned to look at Rake and smiled, then bowed. He said, "Greetings, Lord. I've looked forward to this meeting ever since Baruch brought to us the offer of alliance." Rake looked at Baruch. He raised an eyebrow. Baruch said, "He numbers among the Torud Cabal." He addressed Mamet and said, "We were deeply worried, friend, given the elder majories at play around the barrow." Majories, that's a good alternative to magics.
Yeah, but not nearly as snazzy sounding, is it? Or authoritative sounding.
Yeah, I mean, the magics, it just...
It's really Aleister Crowley. It's That's who it is.
It does have some special attribute that other words do not, I will say.
Correct. We're still not quite sure on what that is. So, folks, if y'all have any idea on what the differences might be, I'm not saying we're open to a huge discussion on the matter, but I mean,
yeah,
that is, love to hear your ideas on it.
That is a magic with a CK.
Yes.
Magics. All right.
Magics.
Mamet said, I was snared for a time, but at the extreme edges of the Omtos Falak influence. Quiescent regard proved the correct course, as the one stirring within did not sense me. Baruch asked how much time they had. Mamet said 2, perhaps 3 days. Even for a Jaghut tyrant, it is an effort to make the return journey to life. Mamet's eyes went to the carafe of wine on the mantelpiece. He strode over to it, then asked if Baruch had any news about his nephew. Baruch frowned and said, No, should I have? The last time I met the child was, 5 years ago? Mamet took a sip of wine and said, Well, Crocus has grown somewhat since then, I assure you. I hope the lad's all right. He was. Baruch threw up a hand and staggered forward. With fear in his voice, he said, What's his name? Crocus? Crocus? He rapped on his forehead and said, Oh, what a fool I've been. Mamet gave Baruch a wise smile and said, Oh, you mean the matter of the coin bearer, do you? Baruch was in shock. He asked, You knew? Rake was standing off to one side. In a flat tone, he said, Mamet, forgive me for interrupting. Will you be attending Lady Simtal's fete? That's ominous.
Quite.
Mamet nodded and said, Of course. With something that sounded like anticipation, Rake said, Very good. We'll speak then. Baruch had no time to think about Rake's sudden departure. It was his first mistake of the day.
That's never a good admission.
No.
That's not good.
It is not.
It's on the playback reel, isn't it? It's like when you go back to the locker rooms and say, Where did everything go wrong? It's like, oh, dadgummit. There it was. There it was, right there.
As Lauren approached the worry gate, a woman with a shaved head and long flowing robes ran shrieking and waving a shred of brown fur in one hand. That poem at the beginning that I read, this is one of the things I was referring to. It's describing this behavior by the priestesses. Yes. Lauren stepped aside to let the priestess pass and watched the woman plunge into the crowd behind her. The festival had spilled out beyond Darujistan's walls, and Worrytown's main street was filled with a mob that Lauren had spent the last half hour pushing through to reach the gates. She absently rubbed the wound Murillo had caused on her shoulder. She suspected that the journey into the tyrant's barrow had slowed the healing. There was an ache in the puncture wound, as cold as the ice in the barrow's tunnel. Lauren spotted 2 guards at the gate and approached warily. Only one seemed to be paying her any attention. Even he spared her only a short glance before returning his attention to the mob. She entered the city without issue. Immediately within the gate, the road split around the base of a squat hill that held a half-ruined temple or tower. That would be Krull's temple.
Yeah. Man, I just, it's such a crucial piece of landscape in this world, isn't it?
Yeah, it really becomes a critical landmark in Darujistan throughout the entire series.
Yeah, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's one that I could. It's kind of crazy. I never put it together for a while. Why it's so crucial is because that's where that blood is spilled, and that's where we first meet. Krull's meeting Kruppa in his dreams.
Mm-hmm. On Lauren's right, there was another hill that contained a garden and held wide steps going up to the summit. The branches of the trees held many fetishes and banners tied to the branches. Lauren could sense those she sought. The sense was strong and unerring. Past the hill, she could see the inner wall. Whiskey Jack and his squad were somewhere beyond it in the lower city. She strode on through the crowds. The guard at Worry Gate pushed himself from the wall and adjusted the strap on his helmet as he paced in a slow circle. The other, older guard asked if the crowd was making him uneasy. The first guard said there had been a near riot there a couple years back. The second guard said he'd been there and they'd had to draw some blood and that had sent them packing. The lesson probably was still with them and likely there wasn't a reason to worry. He asked if this was the first guard's regular duty. The first guard said he was filling in for a friend. The second guard asked what his regular round was. The first guard, who is now revealed to be Circle Breaker, said, midnight till the 3rd bell, Despot's Barbican. He adjusted his helmet again and hoped the unseen watcher caught the signal. He spotted the woman that had entered the gate moments ago. She had matched the eel's description perfectly. She looked like a mercenary and was attempting to hide the bloodstains from a wound on her shoulder. You know what's interesting is his perception of her holding her shoulder was that she was trying to hide the bloodstains, but I don't think, based off what we just read about her, she was actually doing that. She was just kind of absent-mindedly rubbing it.
Yeah, and but maybe there was still some blood there or something. That also
I believe there was blood there for sure.
Yeah,
It's just he's perceiving it as her attempting to hide it, but she was just kind of just absently rubbing it because it hurt.
Oh yeah, and the crazy thing is also to notice that when you know there's a significant amount of foot traffic, I'm assuming, coming in and out of this thing.
Well, he was looking for her specifically with the shoulder wound.
That's true, and then she takes him to be the one that the one. I'm assuming he's the one that looks like he's ignoring her. That looks at her
he just glanced at her. Yeah,
yeah. I'm assuming that was him. So,
on that note, Circle Breaker's glance had been short. Years of practice had made it sufficient. He'd caught every detail the eel's messenger had told him to look for. The second guard said, "That's a grisly watch, and you were here to meet the dawn. The bastards got us working too hard these days. What with the city infiltrated with Empire spies and the like." Circle Breaker agreed. The second guard continued, "I'm here for another 3 hours, and you think they give me some time to join my wife and kids in the festival?" He spat and went on, "No way. Old Barut's off to stand around watching other people having fun in some bloody estate." The way this guy's complaining makes it sound like when we had to be there on Thanksgiving Day to prepare for Black Friday. You remember that? When things got really crazy, kind of at the last gasp of retail before they just finally gave up on...
Yeah.
It's like, Black Friday isn't doing it anymore. Okay, we're going to open on Thanksgiving Day now.
Yeah. Well, what was bad, y'all were management, so y'all had to go in earlier than us. We showed up at like 11, opened at midnight that year. I just sat by your podium for like 8 hours, dude. It was like one whole shift. I sat just stood there and held a sign that said the deal start here.
Nice.
Some of the best money I ever made in my life, dude. It was.
Were you at least dancing and flipping the sign around like those guys?
Please. I'm not Scott. Sorry. I may sound like I have as enthusiasm I do internally. Externally, I'd be looking like a curmudgeon holding that sign.
Circle Breaker said, "Lady Simtal's fate, I suppose." Barut said, "Damn right. Bloody councilmen chuffing around with all their stinking airs, and me with sore feet and all, standing like a statue." Circle Breaker thought this was a bit of luck. The eel had wanted Circle Breaker at the fete, and this man was complaining about it. He manipulated Barut into thinking he was doing him a favor by taking his shift at the fete so he could spend time with his family. Barut was relieved. He said, "Neruz bless you. It's a deal, friend. Hey, I don't even know your name." Circle Breaker smiled and told him. We don't get to hear it. So this mention of Neruz is an ascendant who was known as the Lady of Calm Seas and Fair Winds. So maybe, she was also the sister of Beru.
Oh, Beru Thind. I hear that name
all
the time. That's one of those, it's not a swear word. It's almost like like God forbid.
Or have mercy or something like that, right?
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah, it's not said as a curse. It's never said as a curse.
So maybe this Beirut guy was a sailor in a past life.
Okay.
Maybe a fisherman of some type or something like that.
Maybe so.
Yeah. All right, I think this is a natural stopping point for us this week. We will continue next week.
Yeah, good episode though.
There's some good stuff in here.
I forget, and I don't think this is something that we need to strike. Because I think it's a safe thing to say, is for the most part, for the rest of this book, time does not progress forward except for it's the same day, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. So I think, for the most part, until the conclusionary bit, it's pretty much the same day. I'm pretty sure. So time pretty much narrows down to here. I love it.
Action packed. The rest of this chapter is going to start getting into some stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. For standout moments, Murillo running into Kruppa and Kruppa's reaction to dropping the boxes. That was hilarious.
Oh, yes. I love Kruppa. The more we read through him, the more I'm like, as much as I hate this guy, I love hate him. You know how it is.
Yeah. Finding out that Kruppa has been pen pals with Lady Simtel and is referred to as Kruppa the First. That was awesome.
I do love that. That is great, man. That is too funny.
Us finding out that Kruppa is in fact the eel
that's
is a
right.
huge revelation.
That's a big deal, dude. And we just kind of glossed over that, didn't we?
Yeah. The eel has been revealed.
The eel.
Mhm.
Yeah. At least to us.
Yeah. And then Kruppa mind wiping Murillo.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was interesting as well.
I love that part. I always kind of wonder how powerful he actually is, because we do know that he is a Deck of Dragons adept, but it's so much so that he doesn't even need the deck. He just does it in his head.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that is truly just kind of scratching his surface.
Right. Because so far from him, we've seen him waving his hands around in the market area, stealing all the sweets and everything.
Yeah.
And they were flying some type of telepathy there. So I'm not sure what Warren was being used there, but presumably he has that. He must have access to multiple Warrens.
Yeah, that may be it too.
Yeah. And which ones? Not sure. We can pretty much
never know.
Comfortably say Mocker at this point with what he did to Murillo.
I think so.
We'll have to just kind of keep track as more are exposed over time.
Yeah.
Rake reminiscing about last seeing Ikariam 800 years ago and talking about who all was present at that meeting. That was interesting.
That's very interesting. I love those kind of big info drops.
Mm-hmm.
I love Ikariam. I like and feel sorry for Ikariam.
Yeah, he's kind of a tragic figure.
Yes, he is. But I love him though at the same time.
Yep. All right, you got any final thoughts before we drop off here this week?
No, just a really good episode. Looking forward to the conclusion of this chapter, because this is where it's
about to get real.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Love it.
All right, good job tonight.
Yeah, great show.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.